Hey guys, today we're going to talk about quadratics and factoring quadratics and solving quadratic equations. We're going to start with on page 53, number 104. It just simply says factor the trinomial. So in order to solve quadratic equations, your factoring skills have to be up to par. So this is factor 2x squared minus 2x, or plus 2x, minus 40. Okay, so to do this question, we first want to ask ourselves, is there a GCF? So is there anything in common with all three of these terms? 2. So we're going to factor out a 2. We're left with x squared plus 1x minus 20. Next, we're going to see, is this a trinomial that can be broken into two binomials, or is it a difference of two squares? It's a trinomial. We could find two numbers that multiply to negative 20 and add up to 1. What about 5 and negative 4? Now, if you're not sure what the numbers are, you could always use your calculator, hit the y equals button, and type in the last number, negative 20, and you divide by x. If you look at your table, if you type this multiplication number in and division by x, your table gives you all the numbers that multiply to negative 20. You're trying to find the combination that also adds up to this middle number, which is 1. So if you scroll down a little bit, it gives you a nice visual. 5 and negative 4 will work. So we have 2, x plus 5, and x minus 4. Please keep in mind that the opposite of factoring is multiplication. So if I want to check to make sure I've done this correctly, I can multiply all this together and hopefully get back to my previous step. Now, because this simply says factor, we're done with this question. If there was an equal sign and a 0, we would want to keep going and solve for the roots. So we're done with this question, but let me just show you. If it did say, so this is a different situation, if it did say solve, excuse me, 2x squared plus 2x minus 40 equals 0, you would do the same things, but then you would set each of your factors equal to 0. So we would get negative 5 and 4. So there's just that extra step, and 2 can't equal 0, so we reject that. So there's just that extra step that you take if there's an equal sign and you're trying to solve. Let's try another question. Let's move on to number 131. Now these questions are asking us to solve, and they're asking us to use the quadratic formula. So oftentimes you could try all these factoring methods and they just don't work. So you have to use the quadratic formula. So in this case, or in any case, I guess, the quadratic formula is x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So you just plug your numbers in. A is the number in front of the x squared, which is 1. B is in front of the x, which is 6. And C is the constant, which is negative 21. So we arrive at negative 6 plus or minus the square root of negative 6 squared minus 4 times 1 times negative 21. And this is all over 2 times 1. So that's negative 6 plus or minus radical 36 minus, let's multiply all this together, that's negative 84 all over 2. When you subtract a negative, that's like adding. Negative 6 plus or minus radical 120 over 2. Now to finish this off, we should try to simplify our radical. To do that, you try to find a number that divides into a perfect square number that divides into 120 evenly. Now think of the perfect squares. 1, 4, 9, 16, 25, and so on and so forth. 4 definitely works. Negative 6 plus or minus radical 4 times radical 30. And I know 4 is the highest number because there's no number on this list that goes in the 30. So I get negative 6 plus or minus, the square root of 4 is 2. And then finally, these three numbers have something in common, 2. So you could factor out a 2. So you get negative 3 plus or minus radical 30 over 1. And what you've just found here are the roots of this quadratic. This quadratic or parabola has a positive a value. So that means it's going to be kind of a smiley face. And it's hitting the x-axis twice. And the reason I know that is because I have two answers here. I have negative 3 minus radical 30, comma 0, and negative 3 plus radical 30, comma 0. These are the two moments that the parabola is crossing the x-axis. So let's try one more. Let's try number 145. 145 says you have 5x squared minus 4x plus 23 equals 3x squared plus 14x plus 34. So the first goal is to get everything on one side of the equal sign and a 0 on the other. So I'm going to subtract 3x squared from both sides. I want to avoid having a negative x squared term. Therefore, I'm going to subtract 14x from both sides. This is the side I'm choosing to be 0. And I'm going to subtract 34 from both sides. So I have 2x squared minus 18x minus 11 equals 0. And then, just like in the last question, identify A as 2, B is negative 18, C is negative 11. My quadratic formula that finds my roots is x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So negative 18 plus or minus the square root of negative 18 squared minus 4 times 2 times negative 11 over 2 times 2. So I get negative 18 is 18 plus or minus the square root of 18 squared is, or negative 18 squared, 324 plus, because I'm subtracting, this would be a negative value, 88 over 4. So I have 18 plus or minus radical, let's see, 12 over 4. Now 412 is a really big number. Let's try to find a number that divides evenly in 412. I know 4 goes into it. Leaving me with 103. I don't know if any other number goes into 103. think that's it. 18 plus or minus radical 4 times radical 103 over 4. Radical 4 is 2. And then finally, because 18, 2, and 4 all have a common factor, we could simplify this to 9, 1, and 2. So 9 plus or minus 1 radical 103 over 2. Those are the roots. That's where this parabola will be crossing the x-axis. So let me know if you have any questions, guys, and have a great day.